up standing, please. We're going to have a karakia from our Kaumatua Tami Pokaia to start the meeting.
E te atua kaharawa koe nei mātou e koropiko nei mua I tō aroaro. Ui e te korowai o te aroha, I no me I tēnā o mātou e huitahi nei I tātone. Whakatongia tō wairua tapu hei arahi ngā waiwai o te tangata, kia tutupi ngā moemoea, mai te rangi ki te whenua. Ko koe tau mātou peringa, ko koe tau mātou tokatu moana. Nei mātou e whakawhetai I rui te ingoa tō mātou kai whakahora, wa ake ake, anu. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamo. I declare the council meeting, Hamilton City Council meeting on Thursday the 15th of November 2018 open at 9:34 a.m. Apologies, we have an apology from Councillor McPherson. Do we have any other apologies? No. So moved by Councillor James, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those for, any against, carried. Confirmation of agenda, I'll hand over to the Democracy Manager. Leanne.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Good morning, everyone. And confirming the agenda this morning, we'd ask you to note that it's proposed that debate will be 2 minutes with a 1 minute extension if required, and that attachment 1 for item C9, which is Freedom of the City Awards, the attachment is the nominated recipients' background information has been circulated to elected members under separate cover prior to the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, moved by...
I just again object to the 2 minute restriction and 1 minute extension on debating this. I've raised this at previous meetings on the understanding that we may get some permanence around this with any probable changes to our standing orders. But I now understand that whilst there will be a report on standing orders at the December meeting, I've just heard as a rumour, perhaps more than evidence, that standing orders might not get changed until or become effective until the next triennium. Just concerns me that this is the only meeting that we have in Council where there is a restriction on debate time, and there are particular discussions and decisions that we need to make, which I think should fairly give elected members, if required, the additional time to debate.
Okay, so my reason why I prefer this is because if every member speaks for 2 minutes, it's 26 minutes. If every member speaks for 5 minutes, it's an hour on every paper. And I'm trying to keep the meetings shorter and sharper. And I think if you can't get out what you need to say precisely in 2 minutes, but of course, if any member objects, standing orders say that you get 5 minutes, we have to let that go through. So if you're objecting, we do have to fall back to 5 minutes. So are you...
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with what you've said, Mayor Andrew. It's just that I think that there are issues from time to time where more than the 2 minutes, possibly 3, is required, and so I guess I'm trying to, in the same interest as you, in terms of efficiency, I'm trying to get through the matters as efficiently as we can. I just feel like there is a restriction here. That same restriction doesn't apply or hasn't been applied by other chairs, and if we are if standing orders are unlikely to be changed, then perhaps one possible outcome might be that we actually debate this as an issue at maybe the next meeting, so that I get some indication as to whether I might be a lone wolf on this or that other councillors may support me.
Yeah, I'll just hand over to the democracy manager.
Deputy Mayor wants to speak too. Just in terms of the rumour, from where I sit, at the point that council approves standing orders, it's entirely your choice about when they're implemented. So there is no reason in governance why they would have to wait till the start of the next triennium to be effective.
Deputy Mayor.
Argue that 5 minutes should be the default position, and as you know, because you and I have discussed this, I broadly support Councillor Pascoe's concerns. As you all know, I can be really self-disciplined in terms of my speech length during a heavy agenda, and I would certainly try to be today. Thank you.
Sorry, I've just asked the democracy manager to find the clause, the actual wording of it. Okay. All right, so is there a particular paper today, Councillor Rob, that you would like to go to 5 minutes, or is it generally that you want 5 minutes for every paper?
Yeah, well, I've identified just from my reading, and I'm not sure whether other councillors have any particular, but items 9 and 10.
So are you comfortable for today if we moved 5 minutes for those two papers?
Yeah, but I would.
2 minutes plus 1 minute, so it's
Okay,
3.
look, I'm happy to do that, but look, I'd like to see something sort of. This is becoming permanent at each council meeting now. The restriction from standing orders. I'd like to see something permanent in place. So if this is to become the permanent change to standing orders, then I think we need to change standing orders appropriately, accordingly.
So when's that coming back, Democracy Manager?
As I said at the last meeting when this was raised, Mayor Andrew, the standing orders will be on the December council meeting.
Okay, so is everyone comfortable if we move? Deputy Mayor, keep going, please. You're halfway through, so.
Sorry, I did jump the queue, which I don't do. I'd probably C8 and C9. I'd ask you to exercise discretion. That's in confidential. Just exercise discretion at that time, if you would, Your Worship. Okay.
Councillor Jeff.
Yeah, look, just very quickly, I support really the approach that we're taking here. I do agree with Councillor Pascoe. I think, to me, in terms of there being maybe 1 or 2 issues in a meeting where we maybe could indulge and do 4 or 5 minutes, but to me, 2 minutes is fine. And I think, it's 2018, it's not 1953. We should be able to move these things a bit quicker. We don't have to sit around and all talk for 5 minutes, and I'm totally pro 2 minutes short and sharp wherever we can. But I also think a lot of time is actually spent on questions, and maybe a better approach or another approach might be actually limiting the number of questions. And it would force some of us to actually ask those questions before a meeting, and there might be just 2 or 3 questions actually on the actual day itself. Thank you.
So if we don't need too much feedback on where people stand at this meeting, and that we're going to get to debate and bring this up in December. But if anyone's got anything new to add, by all means, Councillor Mark.
Yeah, largely in agreement with Councillor Pascoe, actually. But I want to add a new perspective in that there's been many, many times during excellent debate that my mind's been changed a few times, and I want to give that. I think that's the richness of this chamber. We've got a report here that's about 400 pages long that we get 2 minutes to have a crack at. And I'm with Councillor Jeff. I think the questions sometimes get a bit tedious when members perhaps haven't read enough of those reports, but in our defence, when you've got a 400-page report coming in, which is now grown to 600 in my mind, the debate is the richness, so I'd be supporting Rob in that one. Councillor Paula.
Because Mark made one, Councillor Bunting made one of my points there. To me, this is 2 things. It's about public access to democracy. So this is the one meeting, or the committee meetings also, but this is on tape, on live stream for people to see, and I think it's the public's right to access the debate and the full thinking of their elected representatives. That's what this is all about. So, yes, we should try and keep it economic when we can, and that's a matter of each individual elected member's discretion. And the only other point I was going to say is, if our contributions and discussions at the updates or workshops were less limited, then I could understand how we could get through council meetings quicker. But actually, sometimes we don't get all our questions answered in those workshops and updates. We're cut out. Even the speakers are sometimes cut short for time reasons. And until that's fixed, we need a full right to exercise full democracy in this chamber.
Okay, so we're moving 2 minutes plus 1 minute for extra time in this meeting, apart from item 9 and 10, which will have 5 minutes. Seconded by Councillor Mark. All those for, any against? Carried. Declarations of interest.
I have a family member who has some involvement with the Dog Obedience Club, I think it is. So just have that noted. There's no pecuniary or, and it certainly doesn't impact on open mind, but just obviously just wish that to be noted.
Councillor Siggy.
I mentioned that I do live in Temperview, so I just, as an interest.
I presume you're talking about the boundary adjustment paper?
Yes, in the yeah.
Thank you.
Item 14.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, public forum. I call Claire Brown of the Hamilton Dog Obedience Club to speak first. You have, so. Can we just get the clock on the screen first, so I can talk to the clock? Can we get the clock up so I can talk to the clock before you change? I know, but then you change away from it. Yep.
Okay, so the clock's there and the presentation's there.
Thank you. Okay, welcome. I'll get you to start by introducing yourself. You have a total of 5 minutes. The clock is up here, and it will count down, and I will be stopping you at 5 minutes.
Indeed, Your Worship. My name is James Carter, and I'll be going first. Between the total of us, we should be under the 5.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Andrew, so presenters know that includes question time, so if they want questions, they need to leave some time. Is that correct? Sorry, I might be wrong.
The questions are inside the 5 minutes if I choose to ask for questions.
Yes, we understand that as well, Your Worship.
Just the clock won't start till you're ready, so.
Good morning, Your Worship and elected members. My name's James Carter, and I'm here today as the patron of the Hamilton Dog Obedience Club. Dr. Claire Brown will speak to other matters more relevant to the dogs themselves. Section 4 of the Dog Control Act sets objectives. The relevant ones today being to make better provision for the care and control of dogs, and by imposing on the owners of dogs obligations designed to ensure that dogs do not cause a nuisance to any person and do not injure, endanger or cause distress to any person. The focus of the Act is public safety. Council's current dog control policy fulfils Council's obligations under the Act. Clause 2 of that policy takes into account the need to minimise danger, distress and nuisance to the community in general, and the need to avoid inherent danger of allowing dogs to have uncontrolled access to public places. And in addition to that, the exercise and recreational needs of dogs and their owners, and it is submitted this goes directly to the welfare of dogs. Clause 5 deals directly with education, and it is this area of the policy that I feel is in danger of being breached. I'm noticing the time. In particular, the trial of just one observation and one skater cannot, in my submission, possibly give Council sufficient evidence to make an informed decision within the statutory decision-making responsibility. Thank you. I hand to Dr. Brown.
Hi. Okay, so our community organisation is run by volunteers. We've been operating at Melville Park for over 40 years. We've got a really good reputation and we offer a quality community service which is available to around 10,000 dogs in Hamilton. So we use the area by the skate track because some dogs and some owners find the classes quite overwhelming. We're often dealing with learners, you know, they've got puppies, they're first-time dog owners. This can be stressful, so what we do is we try to mitigate that and all of the other stimulation that is present at Melville Park by moving away from those stimuli, creating space between those overwhelmed dogs and their owners to work with them in a less stressful environment. And that's really vital for successful training. So those dogs have got to be relaxed enough that they can learn. We want our learners to look like this and not like that. Okay, and if we had co-use with the skate club at the same time, those dogs and owners that are the most vulnerable and the most stressed would be surrounded by extra stimuli, and that's not a constructive learning environment. We could no longer offer what we consider to be a core function of our dog club. We don't support a trial period of park co-use. We don't think it's based on any decent evidence. And look, increased planting or anything to do with the bund wouldn't actually resolve the issue. Dogs have superior perceptual abilities, and as you can see from this short video, the skaters are clearly visible. There's actually no other area of the park that is safe or functional for us to work with these particularly stressed out dogs. So that area is really important to us to carry out our duties. We'd actually need to change our practice, and therefore if this trial went ahead, it actually invalidates any data you'd get from it because we wouldn't be doing what we normally do. This is just in brief, you've got a copy of this, but we think that it demonstrates that park usage is quite high by the dog clubs. You see the WAG club usage up the top, the obedience is around in the middle, and some 15 data points collected show that the skate park usage is often quite low. Look, we've got an existing agreement that we agreed to in good faith that works. We can all use the park together. The two dog clubs only want 5 hours per week exclusive use. That's all we're asking for, and it's only during school terms. The skate club can have all the rest of the time. We're happy to share the park. All we want to do is just to get on with training our dogs, supporting our dogs and our dog owners to be good community members. And to do that, we just want to stick to our original agreement and just between the two clubs have just 5 hours exclusive use per week. And we're really happy to take any questions.
Councillor Mark, just one question, please.
This 5 hours, have you explored any other 5 hours that you could use other than the 5 hours in question with the dog club?
So we run our classes on Wednesday evenings, and the Hamilton Dog Obedience Club would like 2 hours exclusive use then, just to run our classes. And the Agility Club runs on Thursday evenings, and they just want 3 hours. The original agreement's 5 hours, so we're actually willing to compromise even further to reduce that down for us from 5 to 2, from WAG from 5 to 3.
Councillor Gary.
You said that you didn't support the trial because there's no evidence that it would do anything, but the trial is to get the evidence, isn't it? Aren't you sort of circumventing the process?
I see what you're saying, but the idea for having the trial is based on that it would not have an impact, and yet there's one 15-minute data point based on observation of one club to say that it would be of no impact. And actually, if that trial went ahead, we could not carry out our normal functions, so the trial would be invalid. We can't do what we normally do during a trial period, so you wouldn't actually see the impact.
Councillor Robb.
Thanks, Claire. You mentioned about the extra stimuli and distractions. Do you find the same level of distractions arise from the emergency helicopters, the ambulances, the police cars, the increasing road traffic on both sides, you know, both parts of Cobham Drive? I've noticed there's a lot more infill housing going on, so there's more traffic. There's the potential impact of Peacock subdivision and more cars in that area. Do all of those things create that extra stimuli, which is similar to what you're trying to mitigate here with the roller skating people?
That's a really good question. There is a lot going on down at Melville Park, but that's precisely why we need that skate park area, because what we do is we move these particularly stressed out dogs and owners away from that stimuli as much as possible. We move away from the other dog classes whilst still remaining in view of each other and in a lit area, so we feel safe and comfortable and it's constructive for them to learn. So we move away from the roadside, we move away from the paths, and we sort of move by that skate park area so that we are mitigating what's there. So if we became sandwiched between all these stimuli, we move away from them towards a skate park, and yet there's people going round and around quite fast with all those visual stimuli associated with that, that just wouldn't be constructive. We'd just be sandwiched between extra things.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Quickly, I think
that's the last question, sorry.
Dr. Brown, I understand you have some qualification, and just from your organisation, could you just quickly, and I'll ask this of other submitters, could you just clarify your quals, please?
So I have a PhD in psychology, and my topic was dog training and dog behaviour. I have a master's in zoology, and the topic was training conservation dogs, and a bachelor of science in zoology, and I'm a lecturer in animal behaviour at the University of Waikato.
And your colleague?
Excuse me, no, that's enough. Thank you. One question. So thank you very much. We're 3 minutes over time, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Richard Small from Waikato Agility Group. Welcome, gentlemen. I'll get you to introduce yourselves. Same as last time, the clock's up here in the bottom right-hand corner.
Thank you. Bevan Dale. I'm speaking to support Waikato Agility Group. I'm a member of Waikato Agility Group. I'm also a board member of the New Zealand Kennel Club and Dogs New Zealand. One of the key points we wanted to make was that all Waikato Agility Group is asking for the status quo. Again, supporting what HDOC does is we train dogs around an environment that we're trying to condition their behaviour. By having skaters operating at the same time, it delivers a stimuli to the dogs that impacts on our ability to train their behaviour. I think HDOC have covered all the points around that, and I don't need to go into that in any more detail. If I look at the demands, 5 hours a week plus 3 weekends a year, in terms of what we deliver behavioural training for dogs to make them good members of the Hamilton community. We also deliver an economic impact. While we haven't done a study in Hamilton, we've done a study down in Kawerau for their show, and their 2-day show delivered approximately $20,000 in economic impact. The shows that Waikato Agility Group are talking about running, they get over 2,000 entries, and that's why we generate that sort of income over a 2-day period to a community like Kawerau. My only other comment about the trial period is we're heading into the end of term, that the club will be shut down until late January, early February, so even a 3-month trial period starting now wouldn't actually achieve anything because the club will be shut down for a great majority of the time.
So I'm Richard Small, I'm a foundation member of Waikato Agility Group. So from the club's perspective, the existing agreement's working well. We struggle to see any valid reason to alter the existing agreement or instigate a trial. The speed skating track is very underutilised on the evenings allocated to the roller skating club, so we can't see why they want more when they underutilise what they already have. There's no rational reason to grant any of the skating club requests or run a trial. We have a significant financial investment in buildings and equipment at Melville Park. Over the spring, summer, autumn periods, WAG trains up to 70 or 80 people per evening with their dogs on scheduled Thursday evenings. And before and after the training session slots, our dogs are often running loose under control to warm up or cool down as appropriate. Agility is a high energy sport and the dogs love it. They get very hyped and excited when running courses. Just like any other high performance athlete, when the blood gets pumping and the adrenaline is flowing, they can do things that are totally out of character. Just as we see every week during the season on the rugby field, when players get involved in scuffles and occasionally violence during or just after high energy sections of play. Dogs are mammals and in this respect are no different. Our primary risk management tool is to eliminate as far as possible any external stimuli that may attract the dog's attention. Skaters moving at high speed definitely fall into this category. The fence that's been erected is to keep motorbikes, etc. from getting onto the track. It would not be any hindrance whatsoever to a medium or a large sized dog. After all, we train them to jump. The bund offers some visibility mitigation, but it's not full coverage by any means. Removing our prime risk mitigation strategy by allowing skaters on the track at agility training times lacks any kind of logic. The strategy is clearly working, as we have had no incidents in the 2+ years that the agreement's been in place. Our club only requires 3 hours per week of the exclusive access plus 3 competition weekends that we run annually. The skating club therefore has access for 49 weekends in the year, plus 7-day access for the 12 weeks of the year when the agility training is in recess between terms. We run 4 10-week training blocks per year. We take a modern approach to safety and embrace risk-based safety practices. We do not wish to see anyone get injured, but unlike rugby, if our dogs are aggressive or violent, the owners are liable for financial penalties and the dogs are literally liable for the death sentence. Who is responsible if the recommended trial goes wrong? Thank you.
Councillor Paula. Just one question, please.
Yeah, thank
per
you.
person.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. My question was around, are we able to get any information at all about the situation other dog clubs are in, that would add some information? Because we don't have anything in this report, so I don't know a lot about that. But in bigger cities or comparable cities where dog obedience clubs are run from, vis-a-vis the distractions and pressures on the dogs and that kind of thing, is there any data around that, or can there be at any stage?
I'll have to defer to Noreen on that.
There can be data, but I would have to go back to our head office and dig it out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Has staff got anything to add to that? No. Thank you. Councillor Robb.
Thanks, Darren, Richard. The agreement in 2015, as I recall, and I was on council when that agreement was put together, led to quite a number of mitigations that the roller skater people had to put in order to construct the track, which included trees, bunds and fencing. Given that we're now 2.5 years down the track, are there any other mitigations that you think could have been or should be put in place that would improve the potential distractions or the distractions that you're seeing, having now had the experience of that time period?
We don't think so. I mean, we need space. The sport is growing nationally at 8% a year. Our own club is growing faster than that, and we need space. And the space has been considerably reduced by the siting of the speed skating track. We had all of that space before where we could move, and now we don't. So we've had to change practices as well as work with what we've got over the time that we've developed different ways of doing things, but there's a limit. And as sport is growing, we need more space as we grow, and we really can't live with any further reduction of that space. We've looked at other venues, and for various reasons similar to these distractions, there are other sporting events happening on fields. Then we haven't found anything that's viable yet.
Thank you.
Last question, Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew, and thank you for coming. Just a question just in terms of the hours there. So I see there's the roller skating people are actually using the speed track till 6:15 on some Thursday nights, is that right? So
Yep.
There's already been an element of sort of compromise there by the sound of it.
Yes.
How did that come about, and are you happy with that? Or
The 6:15 actually works because we don't start training till 6:15. So what we've tried to do is be as accommodating as we can and still meet the needs of our training programs.
Right.
And because it works to let them skate till 6:15, we've let that run.
Sure, okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you, gentlemen. And our final presenter is Cathy Moody from the Hamilton Roller Skating Club.
No, that's not it.
Okay, so once again, it's 5 minutes on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I will let questions go on for up to 2.5 minutes afterwards, which is what we did, is where the other two clubs got to, and the clock won't start till you're ready. So.
Good morning, Mayor Andrew and councillors. The first and only time the dog club used the middle of the track for parking, which was built at our cost for $150,000, they damaged it by cracking the concrete edging and putting mud down half the track. Repairs are done at our cost, not council's. Initially, the club president denied the damage, but evidence was there for him to see. He also admitted he could not control the situation, as he was busy running 3 dog rings. He and I made a gentleman's agreement that they would only use the centre of the track for dog activities other than parking. We worked out that they could park cars beside the track in rows and have 3 dog rings running. This has worked successfully for the last 2.5 years, and we would like our lease to reflect this arrangement. The fact that they have not needed to park in the centre of the track for 2.5 years, it indicates clearly it was never needed in the first place, despite their insistence at the hearings. There is room for growth for parking in behind the track and the rink. This area is not being used at the moment. I have attached plans and photos of parking in the handout you have in front of you on page 1, 2 and 3. We have trained on the park until 6:15 on Thursday nights for 2.5 years, simultaneously with the dogs for 15 to 20 minutes. Whilst they say they aren't training, they are actually training while we are there with no issues. This was okayed by a dog club member. Both groups have also come down on other nights and other days when we are there training with no adverse effects. We do not mind them being there, and they don't seem to worry about the incompatibility with skaters on these times. The bund and the fence that has been constructed is doing its job by providing screening of the skaters from the dogs. Opus International designed a mitigation plan at considerable cost. See page 4 of the handout. The design was based on what dog clubs wanted, so the dogs could not see the skaters. Why was anything designed, money spent, work done if skaters are not allowed to be there? There is nothing to mitigate. We have also now fully fenced in our track at a cost of $15,000. This eliminates the dangers, which was the dog club's primary concern. See page 5 of your handout. Dog club members' concerns at the hearing process, quoting Mr. Bevan Dale. Mr. Bevan Dale, concern regarding the track was proposed mainly one of safety. According, in his view, a fence was required or a track could be built on the other side of the rink. Ms. Small said that if the proposal was to go ahead, a fence would have to be put in place to protect both dogs and skaters. That's from the hearings. We feel we have mitigated all the dog club's concern. You will also find a photo, page 6, showing dog activities from skaters, approximately 60 metres away from us. All the kids on scooters, bikes and skateboards and the playground are in closer proximity and would cause more distraction and be in more danger from rogue dogs than skaters 60 metres away in a fully fenced facility. I congratulate the staff on bringing in animal education and control to look at the situation. They are independent. We too agree with their findings that there are no issues. We do not believe a trial is necessary. We have already been simultaneously on the park for 2.5 years with no issues, and I will show you a video shortly. The initial hearing process in 2015, in which our lease requirements were formulated, was not fair, not only for us but for the staff running it. I had concerns when the club president changed partway through the hearing process after the previous president said they wanted council to buy their building for $40,000 and the park was not suitable for them. We were not aware until after that hearing process finished that the new president was a council employee. This was a clear conflict of interest that was never declared to us. He had the opportunity to apply undue influence behind the scenes, which we were not privy to, and could have hindered staff running the hearings to do their job without bias. We are, however, very pleased to see the present staff are working in a more equitable way. We are asking council to amend our lease only to allow dog activities in the middle of the track and not parking, and remove the time restraints, or at the very least allow us to train till 7 p.m. This would mean we would overlap with dog clubs by half an hour one night and 3/4 of an hour the other. I have a short video, and you will see that at the beginning of all the car park and the playground are right beside the dogs. You can barely see the skaters going past the tree in the background. Has it gone? What's happened to it? Can you?
That's your video clip. It's very short.
Oh, can you rewind that? That was very quick.
Hang on, wait, Kathy, you've only got 1.5 minutes left, so
okay.
you're
Okay,
better
we'll
off to
just
talk
leave it.
because the clock's still running. Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes, it is.
Okay, can we just stop the
I would
clock?
have liked to have shown the video again because
Can we stop the clock for a minute, please? Sorry. Where were we up to? Okay, so there's 1 minute left.
Well, I would have liked
I've
to see.
stopped the clock because I just want to make it clear to members that that was Kathy's opinion on how she felt when she was dealing with staff. I just want to make it clear that you need to make your own mind up on that, but I just want to say that that was an opinion not necessarily backed up by the truth on some of her perceptions of how she felt staff acted during the last process. So we've got 1 minute left. We've got a lot of questions here, so I'll take people who haven't asked questions in the first instance since we started. I don't think you've asked a question yet, have you, Mark? Oh, I have. You have? Okay, so I think Leo hadn't asked a question, so we'll start with you, Leo.
If you could clarify one thing for me. You've said here on the first paragraph of your notes that you built the track at the cost of $150,000.
Yeah.
If my memory serves me correct, I thought this was sponsored by Fulton Hogan.
No. No, we raised all the money to build that track. Fulton and Hogan were our contractors that built it. But no, they never put any money into it.
My understanding was at the hearings is that if we didn't get it done by a certain date, then Fulton Hogan wouldn't be able to do it.
No. What happened, I had a whole lot of funders, and there'd been delay after delay after delay, and there was an episode where it didn't go it was supposed to go before the Finance Committee and it was delayed. And it was delayed. I don't want to go into too much detail. And if we didn't agree at the hearings, we were told the project wouldn't go ahead. If we didn't agree with the dog club's demands, the project wouldn't go ahead. And we would lose our funding. So that was the essential bit. I had funders that were threatening to draw their funding because of all the delays.
Okay, last question, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So just to confirm, you're wanting 30 minutes on one night and 45 minutes on another night
Yes.
to accommodate how many skaters?
There's often between 10 and 15 training out on the track.
And you can't do that on non-training nights or on weekends?
Well, we are. I'm not quite sure where some of this information come from, but we're on that track every second night or during the day. But what we need to do is, because of wet weather, we need more flexibility. If you get 2 or 3 wet nights in a row, you need to be able to train. With the Wednesday night, we would be very rarely there on a Wednesday night because we train Tuesday, Thursdays and Sundays, and on a Saturday we train on a Saturday morning quite often doing time trials, and Sunday mornings we will also do time trials, so sometimes we're there twice on a Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Okay, so we're now moving to item 10 on page 34. Could Maria and Karen come forward, please? Can I just remind members in the gallery that this is not a time for you to speak now or to sigh or to make any noises. This is now for councillors and staff. So there is no opportunity for members in the gallery to make any further comment.
Good morning, Mayor Andrew and elected members. So as you know, I'm Maria, the Parks and Recreation Manager. I've got Karen Kwok, who looks after our community leases, and Peter Crocker from the Animal Care and Control Centre. So the purpose of this report is to inform Council of the Hamilton Roller Skating Club request to vary the agreed lease conditions and seek direction from Council. The staff recommendation for a trial period would cover 6 to 8 sessions or classes in the new year. We were aware of the Christmas break, but that is what it was designed to cover. The trial was a good faith attempt to meet all the users' needs and maximise the community benefit. I do also have one correction in the report, point 28. In report, it said the speed skating track has been, 18 months. It has actually been in operation for 2.5 years. So I'd just like that noted.
Mayor Andrew, could I just want to make a statement around the staff member that was alluded to in one of the presentations. I can give councillors an assurance that that staff member was not in that department at that time and has had no undue influence behind the scenes or anything of the like in this matter at all, and has pretty much stayed away from this matter, realising the conflict of interest that was present.
Okay, at this point I think we'd like to leave it there and open up for questions.
Okay, so just taking your feedback from earlier on questioning, I'll be just taking questions on one area, and once you're finished on that area or on that subject or that point, I'll be moving on to the next speaker, the next person to ask questions. So I won't be leaving questions open to one person to dominate. So we'll start with Count.
Does that mean In one question each, or one question on each different point?
On that point, on that area, just so that you can tidy up that area so that we can all grasp and close that area off from that person.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I won't come back to you a second time, but I want to give everybody a chance, and that may well mean that your further questions get answered by another member's questions. So, Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Andrew. So my question is to staff. Is there anything stopping the extra car parking required from the dog clubs on occasion to be parked in the grass area instead of on the asset owned by the skating club?
There isn't. My understanding is that the dog clubs wish to retain this space for use, and I see some nods.
The space in the rink?
Yes.
Okay. So what in the report though it says, well, in some of the submission documents it said that the rink was sort of only really used once and they've been using the grassed area. Is that right?
Yes. Again, my understanding is about the growth that the clubs are experiencing and not wanting to restrict their capability to cope with that growth.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Is also on parking. In paragraph 35, you mention about parking plans. Is that a formal document, or is it intended in terms of your recommendation and the discussions you've had with the groups that it would be just simply by casual conversation, or would the dog groups need to lodge a formal parking plan which would set out, you know, who's parking cars and where they park, and, you know, all of the things that would come with that, both in terms of ensuring that health and safety are, and protection of the asset and so forth?
So that was an offer from the Agility Club that should they need to park cars in the centre for an event, that to answer to some of Kathy's concerns, they would be happy to prepare an event plan that was reasonable and suitable to manage that car parking.
Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
I'll come back. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Marson.
I've asked, I think, Dr. Brown about their background qualifications. Now, given that the overseeing of the trial, and I don't mean to be, I just want to get a sense in terms of our animal control unit, and I acknowledge the incredible expertise and work you do in what I'd call problem areas. Could you just give us some sense of the kind of background in terms of animal behaviour, that kind of thing, just in terms of who should participate in that assessment and trial?
Okay, basically all our officers are very experienced in the field of dealing with dogs. They might not know the interpretations or actually what they're looking at, the terminology, etc., but they all understand a little bit about dog behaviour from their day-to-day jobs. I have a background in dogs for over 30 plus years, in various dog training, dog exercises, etc. Worked for MPI for 10 years as a detector dog handler and trainer. Plus I've attended various seminars both in New Zealand and overseas, and have quite an extensive background in dog behaviour. Our intention is just to monitor through that 6-week period. A lot of the monitoring will be done by myself, and then depending on staffing availability, other staff will be there at the time as well.
And just final question, would it be the intent presumably to get feedback from both groups as well? I mean, you do a monitor, but it's kind of, if there are any sort of concerns raised that have what I call academic rigour in terms of behavioural issues of animals?
We're not there to tell each group how to.
No.
They should be running their training
Right.
at all. So, but if they have some input or have some questions, we're always there willing to answer those questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Maria, just a question around what the process or consideration, or how you deal with the considerations of existing use rights in a situation like this, where you've got two really good uses, and a request, how do you manage that when you've got two groups with existing, it's probably not the right term, existing use rights, but you get what I mean?
Yes, so I probably need to say that it is relatively unusual that one user has terms in their lease that impacts on another user in the way that happens here. Staff have spent considerable time talking with, emailing, meeting. We got the two groups together, and as the dog groups have said, there was a position that they were willing to go to, and that was not meeting the needs of the skate club. So that's how we've ended up here.
Okay, so there's no planning or process in the planning of these things that takes into account how long some particular group's been involved here or there. It doesn't get a weighting or a... I'm just wondering, like you say, it is unusual, but you are going to get this from time to time, aren't you?
That's a pretty difficult one, Councillor Southgate, because then you'd be asking to give one user group having more benefit than the other, and in this case we have three user groups all contributing very valuably to our community, so it is...
I suppose it was a little bit about reverse sensitivity as well, yeah.
Look, from my point of view, we always try and get a win-win and look at compromise and get the maximum benefit from council assets that we can, and but in that is trying to avoid conflict and any risk to the users and the public.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, thanks very much. I notice in Kathy's notes that there's been an agreement between the dog people and the skaters that they won't use the internal area of the skates or the speed skate track for parking anymore. Is that correct? Because as it is now, excuse the pun, but the parking in there looks like a dog's breakfast, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, so that's a sort of a informal interim arrangement that they had discussed between the two groups. As in the report, as it says, the dog clubs wanted to retain that provision as it's required for future events to cater for growth. They currently, when they have events, there's a lot of the car park, but also the grass areas are both utilised. But in the future, they may also require additional parking, which they could then use inside of the track.
Okay. But currently, the dog people are using this as one of their rings. Is that correct? Inside the track.
Not as a ring, as I understand it. They may use it for warming up the dogs prior to classes.
Okay. Ta.
Remove doubt. One of the speakers said that no cars are parked inside the ring now for 2 seasons. I think is that correct from your understanding?
Yes, that is my understanding, that they have used the provision once. However, they don't wish to have the provision removed, so that it does allow them to grow as a club and run successful events in the future.
So, just to be really clear, they're not using it, but they want to hold the right to use it. Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Staff recommendation B talks about a trial which has already started on the 13th of November. That's obviously got to be changed. So just to make sure I understand what it's saying, so the staff recommendation, which we haven't agreed on yet, but the staff recommendation that we would do a trial, and that would come, that part of the trial, which relates to condition 24.2I, would come back with evidence, would come back to a Paula's committee. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. No, that's clear for me. Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. How many cars can park on the rink?
So we believe you could get 30 cars in there if it was well organised.
Okay.
Sorry, what did you say there?
30 cars if it was well organised.
Oh,
So the current overlap of both activities that occurs on the park is currently 15 minutes one night and 20 minutes the second night. Is that correct? Ish.
So formally in their lease, the Hamilton Roller Skating Club are not supposed to use the speed skating track on Wednesday and Thursday nights from 5 p.m. till 10 p.m. To allow the dog clubs to use it. But they have been using it, I believe, up till 6:15 on a Thursday evening.
And that's just an informal agreement that they have had between the two clubs. And so this, the skating club is requesting that the informal overlaps go from 15 and 20 minutes to 30 and 45 minutes. That's about right. I'm getting the gist of this. Now, during those, if this trial goes ahead, so it's a 6-month trial, is that right?
The month timeframe is a little bit misleading due to the term times that the clubs are running their training. So the proposed trial would cover 6 to 8 sessions. So 6 meetings, if you like, was the proposal.
Okay. And if it's only 6 to 8 sessions for the trial to occur where both activities are happening on the park simultaneously, will a dog control officer be on hand through that trial period of those times?
We will attempt to be there at those times. We also have other duties as well, so if something urgent come in, like a dog attack somewhere in the city, then we'd have to attend that. But we would definitely be rostering staff.
I guess, yeah, otherwise you're risking the trial not being monitored.
Yep.
And if what if a dog control officer is able to be there on location and an incident occurs? So I'm not too sure, there could be a whole range of incidences, but what would be the action there and then? I know I'm asking pie in the sky because I'm not giving you an example of an incident, but you're the expert.
That's something obviously we'd have to deal with at the time. We'd be there to assist the dog club and the skaters in general, and hopefully prevent something. If the officers can see changes in behaviour in a dog, then they might just go and recommend to the instructor that dog's moved away.
And so 6 to 8 sessions, you'll come back to the Community and Services and Environment Committee with a report for a final decision? Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. My question's sort of more on the longer term history of this. What was the park being used for before that skate rink was there?
So the dog training groups were on site.
That was the whole thing, and then the boundary was effectively the indoor rink, is that right?
Yeah, so there is a map of the park as the attachment on page 59, if you want to refer to that. So that whole area was able to be booked by their dog clubs for their activities.
Okay.
Prior to the speed skating track being developed.
All right. And so during the submissions to that going in, there was some pretty strong submissions against it by the dog club. Is that right? And that's why the mitigations were put in place. Okay.
Yes, that's
All
correct.
Right. Thank you. I'm done.
I'm just flagging that there has been a motion put forward by Councillor Robb, so we'll get that on the board while we continue with questions. Councillor Gary.
I was just going to ask that we change the staff recommendation so at least the, because clearly no trial can't have started 2 days ago. So what would the date be? What should the date be?
The meeting got changed, that's why.
Ah, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the decision, if this gets approved, this trial would start tomorrow. Well,
when there's a meeting.
Today, yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much. And I've just got a question from what the skating club said before, and I'm just wondering, because we're doing this over summer where the weather is probably a lot better than in winter, and they said that they would use, and I hope I remember that properly, might use Wednesday nights more often because of the weather changes. Is that right? So yeah, I'm just wondering whether the trial period is a little bit awkward because it is in summer, and where usually the weather is nicer, so we haven't got the right mix of, you know, of weather and timing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's just what I'm wondering.
So I would suggest that the summer actually is the time of the year where the dog clubs are most active across the whole space. In the winter, with daylight savings, they tend to pull back a little bit where the lights are, but still, I mean, the lights do cover, but obviously the lighter daylight, you have, you know, less concerns about safety under lights.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Just a quick question, if I could, Chair, and it might come up later, just with regard to Councillors Rob's D. Just wondering, to help me understand what was the justification for that.
Rob, would you just like to just give an explanation for Councillor
Yeah,
Ryan?
look, and I did have in my draft, because I haven't got condition 24.2H in front of me, but I was specifically referring to that condition around car parking. So I don't know whether there's anything else in 24.2H which needs to remain. But my rationale, Councillor Ryan, was along the lines of, I guess, and I'll bring this up in debate, obviously, is that there are other areas around the park which can be used for parking. And I'm relying on the fact that it has only been used once in the 2.5 years for car parking. So I guess once I get to the debate and talk about the mitigations that the roller skating people had to put in place, it appears, certainly in terms of what discussion we've heard today and the 2 meetings that I've attended with both groups over the last week, is that my argument is that a number of the mitigations that were required to be put into place in 2015 seem to be working, and the car parking arrangement under 24.2H doesn't appear to be required going forward if it's only been needed for once in the 2.5 years. When my recollection was it was up to 3 times per year that the roller skater people had to set aside the internal part of the ring for parking.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks, and just a question on Rob's, on the D. My understanding is there's a lease between Hamilton City Council and the Roller Skating Club. We can't just arbitrarily remove a condition of a lease without agreement of the other party, can we? So that suggests we can just change leases willy-nilly, and I don't think we can.
That's my understanding, is that's what this council is here for, and that is our prerogative. But I'll pass.
But hang on,
over to our acting.
A lease is a lease.
Well, we set the terms of the lease, but I'll pass over to staff.
Yeah, and then both parties sign that, and then that becomes a contract.
The 2 parties are us and the dog club, and the roller skating club in this case.
So it would need agreement from both parties to do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Hamilton City Council, you're one side of the lease.
Yep.
The other side of the lease is,
correct.
In this case, on this lease, is the roller skating club.
Correct. So wouldn't it say negotiate to remove rather than we can we legally just sorry, we've changed this lease, we're not going to ask you, we're just going to do it? You can't.
Hang on, Gary. Just to be really clear, Gary, the lease is between Hamilton City Council
and the roller skating club.
And the roller skating club.
There's a tenant and there's a landlord, in effect, yeah? You can't just go...
What you're saying is if we agree and the roller skating club doesn't want it...
Don't agree.
Is that what you're...
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that assumes that we can just simply default on a lease.
Well, I think the Rolling Skating Club has made it very clear.
Well, okay, we just need to say removes should be negotiate to remove.
So we would be able to vary the lease. I would point out.
How? Only with agreement of the other party?
Yeah, so
So
my
that needs to be
understanding is that-
acknowledged in
yeah.
the wording there.
What I was also going to say is that there is other risk there because clearly the agility clubs, that condition in the lease is afforded for their benefit. So whilst the lease is not held with the dog agility clubs, there is some risk in being seen to potentially disadvantage them.
That doesn't address
Hang on,
my-
Gary.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Robb, are you happy to have the word changed to negotiate?
Can I make a
Yeah,
suggestion?
I guess that assumes that there might be some doubt with the roller skater club that they want that to remain. But yeah, if negotiates is a word isn't quite so direct as remove, then I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that addresses my concern.
Okay. Democracy Manager.
Well, I was just thinking, taking into account your point, Councillor Mallett, wouldn't the wording be that the council approves the request by the club to vary the lease in the front of it, because then it's clear and the decision is made if that is your intention to make that decision, where negotiation implies ongoing discussions.
You comfortable with that? Okay, thank you. Councillor Angela.
Andrew, just clarification as well, that's car parking arrangements for events. It should be car parking arrangements on the rink. On the asset that they own is the thing that they control, not the grass around.
Can I just leave you to talk with Councillor Robb and get the wording how you're both happy?
Just
Thank
as
you.
car parking arrangements.
To agree on.
Where?
Okay, so we've got a motion on the board. Do we have a seconder? Yes.
My question is, will we be going through these one by one or doing the whole lot? Because that will have a bearing on my vote. So I'd support some of it, but not the other.
Councillor Robb, are you happy to have it taken individually?
Great.
So I'll second the motion on the board to get it to debate. Okay, Councillor Robb.
Thanks, Chair. Look, having been involved in the discussion back in 2015, and that was prior to the building of the skating ring, there was a lot of effort and work put into mitigating what was then perceived to be significant health and safety risks around the construction of the track, where it was going to go. And I remember, I think it was Opus were contracted by the club to work with council and set up a whole series of mitigations that would overcome what was perceived to be the issues of having people moving around that track very fast and potentially distracting young dogs and those and dogs in training. It seems to me that 2.5 years later, and look, over the last week I've been to meetings with both the roller skating people and the WAG group, and I know that we were all invited to attend those meetings. It seems to me that most of the mitigations have worked, and I think the concerns around the health and safety have largely been addressed. The removal of risk per se is almost impossible, and I think of all of the other activities going on around that park for which none of the three groups has any control over, presents in itself those risks. So I think it's a timely opportunity now to work to see if there is, and to run a trial period to see whether those risks now, having given the mitigations, whether those risks are still real and if they are, then obviously the groups will need to be drawn together and further discussion undertaken. Around the parking, look, inside the track, it's been used once. It was presumably quite critical in 2015 because the groups asked for up to three events a year. It's been used once in 2.5 years, which would have been 7 or 8 events that they haven't, or 6 or 7 events that they haven't had to use the track. Visually, I see that there's quite a lot of parking available down the south area and also on the east area that's around the other side of the skating park for tournament days. And so there's no, and there is some proper sealed parking around the park. So there is, well, there doesn't appear to be inadequate parking available. Certainly none of the groups have suggested that to me. One of the concerns I have got, and this is perhaps something that we might need to consider in future, Mr. Small indicated in his presentation this morning that the dog group needed more space, and maybe long term the dog groups may need to look at relocation. I made the comment to one of the questions earlier on about all of the other distractions in this area. I know how busy Cobham Drive is, both roads that go in and around the park. Helicopters, emergency helicopters flying over at any time would be flying over the park, ambulances, police cars, the infill housing, the impact of Peacock over the next 10 years. And then add to that, around the park is also a pathway, and there are skateboards, mobility scooters, e-bikes, Lime scooters when they come to Hamilton, all whizzing around at any time, and none of the groups have very much in the way of control over those people who will from time to time use such apparatus when they're around the park. There is a precedent for this, and I know this will predate any of the councillors around, perhaps except for Deputy Mayor. And I know some years ago the SPCA used to be in Higgins Road, and council must have given approval for a major residential subdivision in Higgins Road, and the council helped relocate the SPCA into an area where it was safer both for the animals and for the residents. When you look at the other 2 major animal groups around Hamilton, we've got Horse Protection League and we've got the Riding for the Disabled. Both of those groups are well away from, I think I've got 5 minutes here. I've used my 5 minutes, have I? Okay, I'll round up very quickly then, sorry. There are precedents where perhaps some of the groups, particularly involving animals, are better suited to be in land areas well away from residential and high-use car areas. And I would advocate that that might be something that we should put on the agenda going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I won't be supporting this staff recommendation here for a trial. I don't agree with it. I actually don't think it's fair on the dog clubs. I think there's an element of the dog clubs being pushed around a bit here. And I think a trial in itself, as we're suggesting it, would be a bit flawed. We've already heard one of the dog clubs say that they would need to change the way they do things if this trial goes ahead. So you're already forcing the dog clubs into a corner here. So, look, I'm all for a compromise, and there's always going to be situations where we have clashes in these parks, and where possible, and there's going to be situations where needs change over time and we need to come to agreements. So I'm fine with looking for opportunities to compromise, but my reading of this is that the dog clubs have actually done most of the compromising here. They have already They've already allowed on a Thursday night the roller skaters to be there till 6:15. They didn't have to do that. And now, and don't forget, they only have a few hours of exclusive time each week. This is their exclusive time. Then they've already given away some of that, and that's only during term time. That's not school holidays. So, And now the roller club wants more. And I just think it's a bit rough, to be honest. I just think, in terms of natural justice and fair is fair, we should actually just let the dog clubs carry on. I think the status quo is fine. Let's not force them into a corner, because I don't actually think, I just don't think it's fair. And I don't like, I'm sorry, Kathy's comments about the staff either. I felt that was a bit out of line, and I just feel there's an element of the club that speaks loudest and makes the biggest noise gets the win here. And I think we should consider both sides here, and I don't think the dog clubs are being represented fairly here. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
I wish I'd gone ahead of Councillor Taylor, because he's made my points and probably more clearly than I'm about to. But I support the parking amendment. I think that's pretty reasonable because it can be done. But I don't support the trial at all because, quite simply, I don't think it's going to work. We've got two very well qualified people who sat up here and said, we can't make this work, we can't even participate. We don't see it as safe. I believe them. We have our own staff saying, well, we may be able to be there unless we're busy, which will invalidate the study in the first place anyway. I mean, I hope they can get there, and I appreciate that they may not be able to, so we can't guarantee that anyway. So I don't think the trial is actually going to work. There's a difference between also having staff there to say, yes, this is a nice, safe thing to do, and there's also a difference between having it a safe place to do that and for the dog club to be able to adequately do what they're there to do, and that is train young dogs. They may be able to do it so that a young dog doesn't bite a skater as it goes past, but are they going to get the proper safety they need? Are they going to get the proper conditions they need? I doubt it very much. The skaters, from what I can gather, went in there with full knowledge that there was a dog club next door, and to me this is starting to wreak a little bit of reverse sensitivity. The dog clubs have made the compromises all along by the looks of things, and the skaters seem, by my reading of it, to want more and more and more. I say leave it as it is. There are 80 hours of daylight to work within. We're talking about less than 5. There is more room for the skaters to make some compromise, in my mind. And finally, I get the feeling that the parking has only been used once in 2 years because, from what I can see, there was a brouhaha, and again, the dog clubs moved aside and parked elsewhere. So, to my mind, I'm going to take the dog club's point of view because I think they have more expertise, and they have been more generous in their compromises already, and I think the trial will be a waste of ratepayers' money as it stands.
Deputy Mayor Marson.
Thank you, and obviously on this and other questions you bring an open mind, and I thank Councillor Pascoe for his quite comprehensive summary. I'm at this point not going to support this recommendation based in part on the process and based in part that in terms of the time I've had today, I have not yet heard compelling evidence why the status quo should be changed. I absolutely want to honour Kathy Moody and the roller skating group for the amazing job they've done and the great social good they have brought. But I just want to also note that, and this probably is a good lesson for us moving forward, when we allow leases, to make sure and to double check that we don't allow side-by-side leases for different activities that in the end may be in conflict with each other. And the problem I have, and ironically I was around, I've got a timeline starting in October 1986 and a timeline that goes to the hearings committee that was chaired by Councillor Tooman in April 2015. Ironically I was around for the beginning and the end but not the middle. But I would say that in 1986 the Dog Obedience Club had a lease, and so that tells me that in effect, as I understand it, they were, if I've got this right, they were essentially the prior user, if I get this. Subsequently, through a wonderful work, the roller skating activity was developed and expanded, and I absolutely honour that. The real problem I have is we allowed a lease for the dog obedience and dog agility to go in on a basis, and then the sort of situation changed. Now, this is where I have a real problem with the process. The Mayor correctly limited, in terms of our standing orders, all the submitters to 5 minutes, all right, only 5 minutes, and very correctly asked us to ask questions on one theme, and that was it, and even as staff on one theme. Now, the difference of the previous process, and this really is real concern to me, on Wednesday the 24th of June 2015, which you're all aware of course, Councillor Tooman chaired a special hearings panel comprised of Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Karina Green. They then brought a series of recommendations, I think eventually back to full council, and full council approved terms, if you like, of the ongoing lease and agreement, correct me if I'm wrong, and on that basis, and solely on that basis, my understanding is the roller skating group then went ahead, did their fundraising, whatever, and you know, when they established this extra piece of site, and I'm wanting to be corrected, they did it purely on the understanding that these were the rules that applied at times. So in a sense that we had and brokered an agreement essentially between all the parties. And the council's condition, our side of the agreement with the roller skating group, was in essence to try and through the hearings process to try and preserve the interests of all parties, but particularly a group that had been operating a very significant social service since October 1986. And while I've acknowledged the wonderful work of the roller skating group, I don't underestimate the incredible social service offered by the dog obedience and dog agility groups to a whole range of Hamiltonians who wish to be responsible dog owners and wish to have assistance around dog behaviours, etc., which I think we shouldn't underestimate the activity or the use and the enormous social service of that group. And that doesn't detract at all, in my view, from the wonderful roller skating group. In a hearings committee, you then obviously would have far more opportunity to test and tease out the evidence that Dr. Brown gave, evidence that our own excellent animal control group gave, and it certainly would have given Cathy Moody a lot longer to sort of develop her concerns and her themes. So in part at this point, I am not convinced we should change the situation as applies at present, in part because of the process we're adopting today, which I think cuts across a proper hearings panel process, and in part because I haven't yet quite received compelling evidence why this change actually should happen, balancing obviously the interests of the two groups.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, Andrew, I think basically the Deputy Mayor said it all as far as I'm concerned. And I wonder even why this matter is before this council. When we go back into history in 2015, there was a lease which was brokered between the dog clubs plus the skating club and council. There's 168 hours in every week, believe it or not. And all the dog club is asking for is 5 of those hours. As far as the parking goes, when I look at the diagram which has been presented to us, staff said there was room for 30 cars in there. In actual fact, they've got 60 cars parked in there. No wonder it's a shambles in there. There's no two ways about that. I can't support either the staff recommendation or the amendment, which is Councillor Pascoe's amendment. As I say, I don't know why this matter is before the council. It's in place at the moment. Is there an issue? Is it fixed? Is it broken? As far as I can see, it's not really broken, so just leave it alone.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I disagree with the statement made that the hearing process in 2015 was an unfair process. It was actually a very lengthy and robust process, and both parties made compromises. The mitigation to manage the risks, as many other elected members have said, has clearly worked out, as there have been no incidences. If the dog control officer needs to attend a call out in this trial, which would rightly take priority, then in my mind the trial would fail, and that concerns me. I'm also not supportive of the delivery of dog training owners in our city being reduced which has been indicated by both clubs should the trial go ahead. On the other side of the coin, I chair the Regulatory and Hearings Committee and see the consequences firsthand of untrained dogs and untrained owners who haven't had that, so I don't want to see a reduction in the city. I do agree with one point that the skating club want to remove or restrict the parking on the skating rink, so I will be supporting D. The only reasons for that are that it is an expensive asset, and I believe the skating rink has the right to protect that asset. But I've also been assured by staff that there are plenty of other places for cars to park when the dog clubs have these large events, and certainly in the last 2.5 years that hasn't been used. So I'll be supporting D, but I won't be supporting the others. Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
We'll also be voting against this, no disrespect to staff, and thank you for all your work on this, because you truly have been between a rock and a hard place on this, and I appreciate that. What we have here is a battle between two very excellent activities, almost victims of their own success, because they've both grown and grown in this space which hasn't grown. It's also difficult because we're dealing with an issue around expensive infrastructure versus the need for open space, and there is some conflict there. I wasn't involved or in any way in the consent time, but I do believe that that is the place where effects and the mitigation of effects are dealt with in a consent. We are hearing some information today, but I dare say we're not hearing anything like the amount of information that Councillor O'Leary and her colleague heard during a consent type process, and so that puts us in a back foot. If there were to be a trial, I would prefer that it was at a time when both clubs were fully functioning at their peak and for a longer period of time. We'd have to do some more thinking about how that would be monitored, because with all due respect, just observation isn't really monitoring. I raised the point about what I loosely called existing use rights, because I'm sure that's not the right term, but here we have two groups that have been there for a very long time, and it's really tricky to manage, and I don't think it's fair for one group to be disadvantaged over another, difficult as that might be. From what I heard today, and I can only go on what I've heard today and the reports, because I wasn't part of the previous process, is that the Dog Obedience Club are looking for a very limited exclusivity, and I think what they're asking for is reasonable. I would like to understand more about how dog facilities like this in other busy centres are working, where they're situated, how they work, how they deal with the effects of safety and distraction, because I believe that it's possible that we could learn something from this, and then we can have the conversation that I think Councillor Bunting may have raised in his questions, which is where should such things be located? Are both, well, obviously the skating's got hard infrastructure, but is the dog group in the right place? Is there somewhere else it could be? Now, I'm just speculating. I'm not saying it should move. I'm just saying that that's the sort of discussion that I would like to understand more about, I think. Thank you.
I will be supporting Councillor Robb's motion. I've spent several nights in my car at the club for long periods of time, just observing without either the roller skating club or the dog clubs knowing that I was there, or I didn't think they knew I was there. And I observed children and people walking on the footpath directly next to where there was training happening with the dogs, roller skates going up and down the footpath right next to where the dogs were training, and children playing out on the field where the dogs were being trained, and traffic within a few metres of within probably 20 metres of where the dogs were being trained in the car park. Meanwhile, it appeared to me that the roller skating was 50 metres plus away, and from what I could see of the bund, and when you got down on ground level, a dog couldn't see over the bund. An adult can, because they're standing 6 feet high. but there is a bund there that stops eye contact between the dog and the skates. Now, I did also observe that there is a space in the middle of the bund for getting vehicles in and out, where for about 4 to 6 metres wide, where you could see a skater going past from down at the level of a dog. And I certainly believe that it's a precision surface that the skaters use, and it needs to be protected from vehicles driving on that surface. And I think the dog club has probably realised that, and that's probably why they don't use it anymore after the first time when there was a accusation of damage. And I believe that we've pulled in somebody who's reasonably independent, and that's our own dog animal control people, to observe while a trial takes place. And the trial is proposed for 3 months, and there isn't a cost to it because staff are already rostered on for that shift. And like our officer said, as long as there's not a dog attack somewhere, they will stay on site and observe and bring a report back to us. So if we're not prepared to put a trial up with with a dog control person with 35 years in experience in that area, now it may be his staff, but to observe what happens over that 3 months and then report back to us, I don't think that's an unreasonable request. And I'm not picking sides here of either the dog people or the skaters. And like I say, I purposely didn't go to the dog club presentation earlier this week, and I haven't gone and talked to the skating people either. I have been collared by somebody from skating last night as I was leaving the building. They weren't there to target me, but they just happened to run into them. And I also met somebody from the dog clubs last week at an event who also talked to me. And I just think let's just test it and let our staff come back to us again and give us feedback on how they observed the relationship. I'm also aware that I think it's a dog agility club can be moved to different locations on the field, and that some distraction is good, because from what I got told last week, and so the position of where they're trained can be moved on the field to have enough distraction but not too much distraction, and that's another part of another moving part with all of this. So I don't believe that the report is, I believe that the report staff have done a good job. I believe that this is a hard call for us as councillors to make, but what we're asking here for is a 3-month trial over the summer and then a report back. So we'll go to the board to vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rob.
Yeah, if I could just have a right of reply. I wasn't going to, but I'd also like to follow on from Councillor Southgate's comments to thank the staff, because I know that they have put a lot of effort into not only writing the report, but also meeting with the groups. I think if we cut through the fact that we have got 3 very successful community groups all meeting and with some degree of difference, what we really should be considering today are these activities that are being conducted on Beta Park compatible? I think we should ignore any emotional issues or who's been there the longest or who deserves to be there and who doesn't. Are these activities compatible? The informal arrangement that the groups have had over the last 2.5 years following construction of the racetrack suggests that they are. What the trial will do will determine whether or not this is correct and provide us with the adequate evidence to either support it or determine otherwise. And the final sort of comment I'd make is, and I made that in my debate, has the park over time become unsuitable for dog activities? And I don't suggest this is the case because of roller skating, but given all of the other environmental factors of where the park is actually located. So, look, I'd encourage those who think otherwise to support this motion. As Mayor Andrew has said, it's a 3-month trial. It will give us evidence that will either determine whether the activities are compatible or not, and that'll give us a basis to not only make what we think is going to be the right decision, but also give confidence to the 3 clubs that the evidence supports whichever way council is likely to make a final decision. Thank you.
Okay, so we're voting first on A. Motion 1.
Receiving the report.
The motion is carried 11 for, 1 against.
Just for the sake of those watching, can Democracy read out the next motion, please?
Motion 2, that the council approves a trial period to suspend lease condition 24.2I, allowing dog club training and speed skating service activities to operate simultaneously at Melville Park between 15 November 2018 and 1 March 2019. And B, notes that a staff recommendation on varying Hamilton Roller Skating Club Incorporated leases condition 24.2I will be presented to the Community and Services and Environment Committee following the trial outlined in B above.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote on that.
The motion is lost, 7 against, 5 for.
And we'll go to the third motion.
Oh, sorry, I was waiting for someone to read it out. I thought you were going to read it out.
The motion is carried 8 for, 4 against.
No, we'll keep going. Okay, so we'll move now to item 5 on page 6. Moved by myself. Seconded by Councillor James. All those for? Any against? Carried. We're now moving to
Confirmation of the council minutes, 11th of October.
item 5, page 6.
Yeah, and you may withdraw, but under matters arising, I wonder if we could get could we get an update in terms of the resolution from page 16? I'm wondering if the GM, or if, with your leave, your worship, could just give us a quick update. This is to do with the negotiations with Waikato District Council, what progress we're making in that area.
Yeah, this is just receiving the minutes.
Okay, so...
It's in the Chair's report.
All right, sorry, apologies, I'll come via there. Sorry about that.
Okay, item 6, page 18, moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those for? Any against? Carried. Item 7, page 22, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor James. All those for? Any against? Carried. Item 8, page 26, moved by Councillor Marks, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those for? Any against? Carried. Item 9, page 31. Evelisa, thank you.
So before Evelisa speaks, just to answer the Deputy Mayor's question from the previous item, you can see in the paragraph there that basically what's happened, there hasn't been availability of key elected members at both ends, but my understanding, and unfortunately Blair's not here today to be able to speak to this, but I had a quick chat to him last night. He's had an initial meeting with senior staff there just about actually working out when that meeting would take place, and there's just some comparison of diaries happening at the moment, but hoping to have that prior to Christmas, and then we can report back at a future meeting in December.
So the next two items I'm handing over to Evelisa. It's quite important that pre-Waikato Regional Council addressing these issues that we have lined everything up and all our resolutions in the correct way. So this is just ensuring that that's wrapped up pre it going to a council who may then not use us having not had our motions in order as a way to, we're just trying to eliminate that possibility. So thank you, Evelisa.
So further to the information provided by Mayor Andrew, the recommendations in the provided in the Chair's report today are to provide Waikato Regional Council with a formal council endorsement of the disability fare concession of 100%, and also an assurance of to signal an intent that Hamilton City Council would consider providing funding for the Hamilton City local share of the requested business case for the free youth concession fares. So it's anticipated that that funding is from existing budgets within our transport activity. But noting that this does not commit funding, but it signals our intent to fund the HCC local share should Regional Council approve the business case funding. So we've noted an update in the recommendations just to make it clearer, and Becca's just completed that on the screen now, and it's due to the fact that the GI committee has on the 23rd of October already resolved to request Regional Council consider funding a business case to pull together a formal assessment of the problems and benefits of a free youth scheme in terms of public transport or bus concessions, and that this business case will include accurate costings and benefits for council to consider. So the reason this has actually been included in today's Chair's report, as Mayor Andrew has indicated, is that it's due to timing. We've been advised that both items are now being considered at the Waikato Regional Council Strategy and Policy Committee on the 4th of December. Therefore, we're just requiring our endorsement of the decision so that it provides and signals an intent of our council's I guess, recommendations for Regional Council to consider during those committee meetings. Happy to take questions.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
I'll come back to a question on the City Council. I'll do it in statement of, speaking to your report, because I do want to mention.
So Deputy Mayor,
question around disability.
Can I just remind you, just pluck off one area and then we'll go around the room and come back if the rest of your things haven't been answered.
I'll be debating your report. This is my question, disability concessions, and perhaps Leah, who from our team was at the hearings?
Our representative at the hearings was our G&I committee chair, Councillor McPherson.
Okay, so basically the issue here is, so I've got this right, this is a recommendation that for some reason, rather than going to the Regional Land Transport Committee, goes to their Strategy and Policy Committee. Could you just explain?
So during the Waikato Regional Public Transport Plan Hearing Committee deliberations, a recommendation was made to have disability concessions of 100%, and that is now being considered at the Strategy and Policy Committee by Regional Council. as a recommendation.
Sure. With regard to the Waikato District Council members on the committee, was that their individual is that District Council's formal position, or was it just purely members of the committee hearing evidence and making a call?
I'm unable to comment on that as I
thank
wasn't
you,
present.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. My question relates at this point to the disability subsidy, which I've been favourable to, but you've changed the recommendation now. It's still subject to a business case though anyway, isn't it? It's got to be. There's got to be some money and there's got to be, I mean, those seats will be funded from something, somehow.
I'll just send that over to Robin.
So yes, it still will be a business case, but I guess that we are just supporting the regional council with picking that up. So they will be the ones that need to work through the process that they need to, which is why it's going to their strategy and policy committee.
So why did we strike, I mean, the recommendation makes it quite clear that the business case is their work. Why have we struck that out when, you know, that's going to provide the sound basis for a concession to proceed?
So, no, I guess there's two parts. So it's a disability fare that we are just supporting. We're not undertaking to commit to any funding towards the disability fare. What we are committing to is assistance if they want to proceed with a youth concession.
But we are committing funding to a youth share, but not a disability share in those. Is that
correct?
Really? Okay, surprising. Thank you.
I guess just to clarify there, the disability is, the intention is it's region-wide. The youth concession is intended to just be Hamilton City.
Yeah. So I'm just asking about the wording and what the intent and what they actually say, so I can be clear. So thank you. You've helped me with that.
Councillor Robb.
My question kind of follows on from that. It's about the funding of the youth, proposed youth, or the investigation into the youth fair. What's the rationale behind Hamilton City Council putting up to $25,000 into a fund when the Waikato Regional Council willingly has undertaken to manage and operate the bus services? Surely that whatever the funding cost is should be met. If they see a benefit, they should be funding the whole cost of the business case rather than us topping money in.
So I guess the business case is to do the investigation and to understand the benefits and the costs to all parties. So there is benefit to Hamilton City if we get a youth concession. So the aim and the discussions that have been had are that those benefits are reducing the number of people that are driving, particularly to schools, to university, polytech and those sorts of things, which all lead to reduced congestion on our road network. So that would be the point of that business case, is to actually understand what are the realistic benefits and costs and where do the benefits actually lie, so that there is an understanding perhaps where costs need to lie in the future as well.
But can I ask this follow-on question from that? At the end of the day, doesn't the Hamilton ratepayer end up paying for it if it goes ahead and it reflects in the levy that is charged through the Waikato Regional Council rates?
That is most likely, and that's, I guess, why we want to make sure that we're getting a business case that truly investigates those benefits and that we understand for both parties exactly where the benefits lie and where the costs should lie as a result.
Yeah, okay, I might come back with another question. Thank you.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Robin, Evelisa, what would be the cost of, the full cost of the Waikato Regional Council doing a big full business case on the youth concession? What sort of money are we looking at for them to do everything from woe to go that they need to do?
So at the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, it was detailed or advised that it would be anywhere between $100,000 to $150,000.
Right, okay. So they're just asking for us that a relatively small contribution, and they're going to, and they would presumably pick up the rest of that tab.
correct, they would look at funding the remaining.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Is there going to be any, should we say, measure on the type of disability which these people have to have? You know, we're looking around here, probably everybody could have a disability if they wanted to, you know. Is there going to have to be a medical certificate or something like that, or otherwise, you know, this is going to be open slather, I think?
So I've been advised by Regional Council that there will be a criteria for eligibility, and that will be presented for review at the joint Public Transport Committee that we have a representative on the 26th of November, and so that provides us with an opportunity to review and endorse that. Current indications is that they are going to use the total mobility criteria that is currently being used. They're also considering a letter from a registered GP should you be or someone be unable to drive or be mobile for a temporary period of time. So those types of considerations are being presented.
Councillor Angela.
Has Waikato Regional Council indicated that if they go ahead with a youth concession fare, that we would have to contribute to that fare?
They have indicated that the fare revenue that is lost would need to be made up from somewhere in terms of a third party to make up that fare.
So why not the same for the disability fare then?
The difference between the two is that Hamilton City, in terms of the youth fare, the third party is still being able, there's a need to find that funding. So for the disability fare, Regional Council will need to look at how that the loss of fare is funded within the Regional Council budgets or funding arrangements.
So they're going to, the Regional Council's going to pay 100% of the loss for putting in a disability fare concession, is that correct?
Potentially.
But not with youth fare?
No.
And the 25, sorry, I think C is quite wordy and a little confusing, but the 25,000 is we approving up to a maximum of 25,000 to support a business case.
Yes, should the funding be approved by Regional Council.
And and you've noted in the report that there's no financial impact because we've got the 25,000, but I would assume we've just signed off the LTP that 25,000 was earmarked for something else. So what's the something else we're not doing? Or do we just have buckets of cash that we can allocate to things like this? I mean, we may do. At times it's appropriate to have that kind of a budget bucket, but I need to understand.
So it's in terms of the funding is anticipated in our revenue within the parking and the transport activity. So it's not stopping anything at the moment, but the committing to that funding is just an intent. It doesn't mean that we need to spend that money. So we intend to utilise our transport activity in terms of our public transport and actually looking at ways to improve and provide.
So are you saying, do we have a reserve, a line in the transport budget for projects as they come up like this?
Is it one for you, Lance?
I'm just trying to. We do this this a lot. We say that there's no financial impact.
It's from the parking. So the parking revenue that we've had has at the previous GNI has had an increased in terms of revenue. Therefore, the funding we're anticipating is using that activity in terms of apportioning that and investing that back into the business case.
Okay, so because so last question: do we fund general bus concession fares for Regional Council? Do we pay a proportion? We don't, do we? We pay for our contribution as the infrastructure.
Hamilton City pay towards the infrastructure, yes. Hamilton City residents pay through the regional
Yeah,
council.
But it doesn't
rates.
come through this council, whereas this is indicating that that might be different. That's what I'm reading. It's what you're saying. This is indicating that should a business, they want money from us for a business case, and they may want money from us to go ahead with funding the revenue gap, but they don't do that with other bus services.
So that would be part of what the business case worked through. One of the options would be that they would increase through the regional council the rate that they get from all Hamilton City residents, for example, to cover the youth concession if
Yes.
that did go ahead.
Sorry, my question and your answer prior was, will they come to this council, could they come to this council after that business case and say, here's the funding gap, we want X?
They may do.
Okay.
That would be what the business case needs to work through. What would be the appropriate way of gathering that additional funding that would be lost as a result of the concession?
I understand. Thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Councillor Angela has covered off my question, but I will signal an amendment to Part C of the recommendation.
Could you just work
Yes,
with
I've given them.
I'll second that.
Yeah, understand.
Future costs.
Rob, can I just get you to get together with Evelisa and we'll stop for a break?
Yep.
Because just to ensure that, I mean, if Evelisa's happy with your wording.
Yep. Okay. Essentially, what my aim here is to take out our funding of 25,000. I'm still not. I'm not against the business case being done, but I'm not supporting the spend of 25,000.
So just to be clear, the reason for the 25,000 is, well, maybe I'll talk to you in the break.
Yeah. Are you?
When are we back in?
Well, we'll just.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll just continue. We'll just get the questions tidied up before we break. Okay, I understand now what you're saying and why you're saying it, so we can continue. And it's very clear what you're saying is you don't want a 25,000 in.
Yep, but still want the business case to go ahead
yeah.
if Waikato Regional Council want to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Just to be clear, because there's a whole misunderstanding about who's funding it. Under all circumstances, the Hamilton City ratepayer will pay for it. Am I correct? I just want you to answer this. A, because Hamilton City ratepayers will not be receiving any income. B, because Hamilton City ratepayers are Waikato Regional Council ratepayers who pay for it. Or C, if it's funded out of some sort of over budgeting that we've done, that money could have gone back to the ratepayer or didn't have, or would be reflected in our balancing our books, budgets and all that sort of stuff, which would flow through. So under all circumstances, the Hamilton City Council ratepayer will be paying for any loss of revenue as a consequence of these. There's a whole lot of ways it'll happen, but in all situations, it will impact the Hamilton City ratepayer. Am I correct?
Not necessarily. So one of the options that's been talked about is potentially charging, for example, to have commuters parking on the outskirts of the CBD. Now, a lot of those commuters come from outside Hamilton City. So that's one of the options that we could look at through a business
So you'd
case.
only charge out of residents, out of city ratepayers?
No, it's saying that, and that would be something that you'd have to work through, but what I'm saying is it's not necessarily only Hamilton City Council residents. It may be primarily Hamilton City Council residents, but that would be one of the things that you could investigate as another way of getting some funding to come in to offset that loss of income through the concession.
Drew a very long bow then.
Councillor Jeff.
Mayor Andrew, can we just get those recommendations up again? I've got a question about Councillor Robb's.
I'll just...
Because I think there's my issue with it is, as it stands at the moment, I think it's pretty much identical to the recommendation
Yes.
that came out of G&I anyway.
And it's exactly what democracy has...
Okay.
Just so can we come back to you?
Okay.
Councillor Paula.
I was just going to ask the mover and the seconder whether, because my issue, I can't see it there, sorry, but my issue with the amendment, as it was with the original substantive motion, was that it doesn't make a reference to a business case. I'm very much in favour of disability concession, but I still think we struck out the fact that it was really referring to a business case in the first place. Everything should be underpinned by a business case, and we've taken those words out. I wondered if you would be happy to put the original staff words alongside. Very supportive of the concept, absolutely.
I've still got business case in the
motion. No, in the disability bit. I can't see it, I'm sorry, it's not up on the screen. Oh, okay.
Councillor
I thought
Angela.
your A didn't include a reference to a business case.
I have not, I've only changed part C. So
Okay.
It is.
So it's
is exactly the same.
no, the strikeout. Oh, so your amendment
That's
does
not-
not strike that out?
No. No.
Brilliant, thank you,
no,
that's,
no,
yeah,
no.
that's clearer to me, thank you.
The business case is just the youth, though, not for disability. They're just going ahead with that.
Yes, so
Yeah.
Regional Council are already taking the disability concession through their process, that we are just endorsing the process. So
They're still going to do a business case, though, you told me that, they're still going to work through. They're not going to implement a disability fare straight up, are they? Is that what they're proposing?
That's what that says.
they will take a paper up to their council with the facts and figures in regards to the disability concession through their council process. The business case referred to here is our youth concession request for funding for a business case for us, for Hamilton City. It doesn't refer to the business case. We're not requesting Regional Council complete a business case for the disability fare concession because that's their process to consider under their council.
But then we don't have access to the information of the business case. We're endorsing something, in fact, that we... I mean, look, I'm all for it. I'm just trying to make sure that the process is strong.
Yes.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah, Mayor Andrew, I just had, if Councillor Southgate's finished, I just had one other process question of staff. Does C doesn't indicate this council giving some money over and above the fact that our residents are also Regional Council residents?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so do we have a seconder for the motion? So we've got the amendment moved by Rob and seconded by Councillor Angela. So I need a seconder for the motion. business case stack up and it comes back to government through a larger NZTA subsidy. This has huge benefit for our city with little cost to us in the long run if we get that subsidy through, which central government has indicated they'll consider. So this is about not tripping the process up, because by us not putting up a small amount of the money towards the business plan that we've asked for and that we're proposing, which then flows through to, in the end, we can't ask for the larger NZTA subsidy, which this government has said they'll support or have indicated they'll consider supporting if we don't get the business case done in the first place. So we have to start with the business case, and we need to show our willingness to be involved in a small way as a financial partner to that report. So I hope that helps you understand the background. Councillor Jeff.
Andrew, yeah, I support both recommendations in the Chair's report. In terms of the disability concession there, I think as a council we should be endorsing this. I went to the PT Joint Committee, which is a regional council committee that looks after public transport. Councillor McPherson and Tuman are on that. Councillor McPherson was away that day, and I heard a very powerful submission from the disabled community on what an impact that would have on their lives. A lot of these people are completely dependent on public transport, and they made a really amazing submission that day. Subsequently, the hearings committee considered all the submissions and made a decision to proceed with it. However, that is by no means a done deal. It goes to the Regional Council on December the 4th. And really, I think, as a council, if we could endorse our position on it, then it strengthens the case on that day, because it could go either way. In terms of the youth concession, I support this also. Doesn't mean I support a youth concession happening. It means I support some robust research and a business case being done to see if it stacks up. We do know there's an issue in Hamilton, there's no doubt about it. It's not just perception. The morning peak is a hell of a lot busier during the school term than on the holidays. Staff have got comprehensive data on the impact of numerous intersections in our city. So there is a real issue there. What we're looking at, I guess, is this going to solve it? What impact will a youth concession for buses have on the number of cars on the road? It will take some off. We don't know how many it will take off. So I think surely it's in this council's interest to have solid, comprehensive research done on these issues before we go any further with them. That's all we're looking at here, asking the regional council to do that work so that we can make an informed decision. That's all we're doing. And the regional council's position is that, hey, it's going to cost up to 150k. It's going to have a significant impact, good impact on our city, they think, if it goes ahead. They want some skin in the game, and I understand that. They don't actually have that money budgeted to do this, so they actually need a bit of help. And so that's the conversations that they've had with us. Well, I'm not exactly sure, but the indication I got was that they didn't really have the money to do this. So it was going to be a bit of a goodwill thing, and they're asking for a bit of goodwill back. And I think it's for this council, if you consider the future, why shouldn't we have a good look at this? Why shouldn't we? The problems at our intersections in the morning peak is not going to go away magically. This is something that could well help. It could take a third of the cars off the road at that morning peak. Let's at least have a good look at it, get the regional council to have a good look at it. Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Mayor Andrew, we should have a good look at this. We should, but in my view, that exploratory work is under the responsibility of the Waikato Regional Council. We also don't have budget for this. The fact that our parking revenue was slightly up doesn't mean to say we should jump in and spend that money. This council spent $150,000 on the initial feasibility study for our theatre that is now our Waikato Regional Theatre. But being the lead on that project, we were responsible for the costs. So we've spent $150,000 on something that was a regional facility, and we didn't go out shopping for more money. So bus services, in my view, are the role of the Regional Council, and I applaud them for looking at the disability fare concession and for the youth concession. But that exploratory work, in my view, is their business as usual, so I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. 5 of us have just been down to a conference called Traffins, in which the theme, a very effective theme, a very popular theme right around the country, including at national level, is putting people first, not cars. Now, this isn't a debate whether people should get in and out of cars. You know, I note on a lot of the comments from councillors who were there that Wellington was a wonderful place because we put people first, and the fact that cars weren't first made Wellington a vibrant experience. We have to do something differently in this town, otherwise we're going to be car-centric and we're going to be clogged. This could be that different thing. This is a massive opportunity, and it will require massive thinking. But we do have to invest. Now, what we're being asked to invest here isn't that much in the grand scale of things. Regional Council, we've thrown this at them. They didn't see this coming. If you'd been at the Access Hamilton meetings, you would have seen their faces when it was brought up. And they have graciously said, OK, well, perhaps we could find 4/5 of this, but would you put in some skin into the game? Now, I think we need to signal to our residents and to the Regional Council that we are serious about doing something different and having a stake in public transport and making it effective and taking it seriously in this town. It's well worth exploring. Will it work? We don't know. Will youth take the bus? We don't know. Will it get people into public transport as opposed to cars? We don't know. How much will it cost? We don't know, and we won't know unless we do this study. The indications are, from my reading of the tea leaves with the Regional Council, is that they won't get involved unless we put some skin in the game, and we'll never know. We'll never know. Now, 2 things could happen if we never know. We could decide not to do it, or we could decide to do it. Now, if we decide to do it without having followed this process, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in trouble. So this study does depend on the 25K that we're being asked to put in. Staff have said it can come out of existing budgets. We've just finished debating a trial. I argued against that trial because I thought it was too expensive. I think this one is worth it. Yep, it is, as Councillor O'Leary said, their responsibility to run public transport. But again, we have come at this from left field with these guys, and it is their responsibility, and they will still put in about 4/5 of the money. But we will not know until we ask what the result is going to be. This is being softly. This is following due process. This is asking for a thorough, comprehensive business case before we even entertain the idea of doing it. It's not presupposing whether it's a good idea. I'm like Councillor Taylor. I'm not sure whether it's a good idea or not, but I'd like to know. I'd really like to know. It could be a game changer. It could be the dumbest idea in the world, but it's worth exploring, and it's worth us, I think, investing a reasonably, and 25K is a lot of money, but a reasonably, in this case, insignificant amount for the result it could possibly get. So, to my mind, look, we've got to get moving on getting moving. We've got to get moving on getting moving. We've got to do something different, and this is the first opportunity to do so.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Bates, is it?
Yes.
Your Worship? Oh, good. Excellent. No, I won't take the whole time. Seriously, I just, first of all, I want to talk to item A, receiving the report. I just want to make brief comment in terms of the Hamilton City Council, District Council cross-boundary discussions, and obviously looking forward to those happening and looking forward to regular reporting. I just want to publicly emphasise, notwithstanding the Deputy Mayor of the Waikato District and his colleague councillors who border the city came and asked us, made a proposal around the library. I just want to stress that we certainly have not ruled that out of hand. We want to see that particular proposal in the context of a range of cross-boundary issues, and obviously trying to get a fair and reasonable outcome for all concerned. And we all, I think, have very great regard for Dines and Axel, Rob and Noel as our colleague councillors in the district in terms of bordering the city, and obviously very much want to work with them. Obviously, I think what we're trying to avoid in the long term is the introduction of a Hamilton card, which will mean that we will actually have a differential charging for a whole range of our facilities based on whether or not you're a resident of Hamilton or not. And obviously that does include a fair and assessment moving ahead of what should be the correct boundaries for the city and what we do in terms of regional facilities. Moving on to the other items in the Mayor's report and the recommendations, B and C, Councillor Bunting's basically said everything I want to say on the youth bus proposal. I do stress that while Regional Council does this is an absolute partnership, and that's of course why we have the Public Transport Committee, very ably led by our former Mayor Russ Remington, and I do think that I will be supporting the Mayor's proposal about putting that quantum. And I think long term, in terms of where public transport is going in this country, our desire to try and reduce road congestion and mayhem, particularly around school opening and closing hours, I think this particular proposal may, in terms of its business case, come up with some very interesting and positive recommendations. Finally, with regard to the disability concession, a little bit concerned in terms of the non-support from the members of the Waikato District Council on this particular proposal. We always have to remind ourselves, without tempting fate, disability doesn't necessarily creep up. Anyone can have a major change of life circumstances where they will be individually, or loved members of their family will be very grateful for that disability pass, and it's also about keeping beings, our citizens, connected to the rest of their community in spite of a disability they may have. And this is again where public transport is a very crucial thing. We have a service called a Total Disability Voucher Course, which operates for some of our older and other citizens, but it seems to me that all we're doing in that area is just perhaps growing that proposal and trying to reach out and make life a bit easier for people who may find, even in terms of their life journey, and I can't stress enough, unexpectedly they fall into the category of needing a disability card.
Councillor Robb.
Chair, look, I'm supporting the amendment. Waikato Regional Council operates, and they do this willingly, the bus service, and accepts responsibility to undertake business cases where there are recommendations from member councils, and those recommendations reach a certain threshold of support. I'm confused from the Mayor's address as to whether the other councils within Waikato Regional Council will bridge the remainder of the funding, or whether we will simply be funding 25 and Waikato Regional Council the balance. And I suspect from listening to Councillor Bunting, rather than the 4/5 he mentioned, Waikato Regional Council will fund 5/6 of the funding. But just remember, councillors, Hamilton City ratepayers pay roughly half of that 5/6 also. So when you get your rate bill from Waikato Regional Council next year, it will contain a half share of the remainder of that business case. Look, I'm not against the supporting of the business cases, but I am around the cost. Council and around the fact that in this report it states that there is no impact on our financial strategy. Councillor Mallett at Tuesday's briefing indicated a concern that we're funding, where that funding from existing budgets would mean some other asset not being maintained or some other project being deferred. Councillor O'Leary has also focused on that this morning. We need to remember, councillors, that this city financially is running on empty. So every decision to spend impacts on our operating deficit, and as a consequence increases the need for the city to borrow.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Look, I'm very pleased to support progress with the disability sub-fare concession. That's been talked about now, from my knowledge, for at least 8 years. And it was in the previous iteration of the passenger transport plan. Didn't go ahead at that time because of the financial impacts on the ratepayer and the other bus fare payers. But I fully accept that if we're going to have a modern accessibility to our public transport, we need to open that up to those with disabilities so that they're not constrained by the limitations of the total mobility scheme, which is very good, but it's, you know, money only goes so far in that scheme. So fully supportive of that. Having said that, there is obviously a background paper that WRC are going to see in respect to that, and we should be supplied this. We should understand the background to it. It's easy for us to endorse things when we don't deal down into the detail, and we do need to look at that report. In terms of the youth, I'm probably going to move the amendment, support the amendment, I should say. The reason being, and I do want to look at the youth fares, but there are a number of issues that have got to be explored before I'll be fully comfortable with it. Got to really understand what the outcomes, the real outcomes and benefits would be. There's a lot of work to determine that. Would it substantially reduce congestion? I hope so. Would we get an uptake from youth on the buses? Would we need to put more fleet on accordingly, like we did with the Orbiter? When the Orbiter fares were so reasonable, we had to put on several more to get people to school. And versus the costs. The concern I do have with this is that if we take out our seniors, those with disabilities, and our youth, only a very few will be paying for the overall service of the many. And whether we like it or not, and philosophically we can be in favour of supporting youth, but whether we like it or not, school trips are part of the bread and butter of the revenue of the bus service. It's true. So what I need to know is so the business case, yes, let's bring all of these things back to the table. It is the Regional Council's role to do such high-level strategy work and business cases. I know that when I've been at Access Hamilton meetings, we've had quite a bit of discussion around this and the potential to use parking charges to offset any future cost. But this needs to be discussed in much more detail and explored in much more detail before we can get there, because we're still evolving what our parking charges look like and how we factor into things like congestion charges in the way we deal with parking, so that we shift commuters out of their single occupancy car trips into work and those kind of things. So these things are not black and white in my view, they're all interwoven. So I'm going to support the amendment at this time, and I look forward to being able to support both in the future, both youth and disability concessions at a time then we can reasonably afford them, and the benefits are there.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, look, I can definitely support the disability one. There's no two ways about that. But with the one with the under 18, does this mean that every time a kid under 18 gets on the bus, it's a freebie? Go to the pictures and all that sort of stuff. How are we going to actually differentiate between them going to secondary school? I don't know what's ever happened to kids actually biking to school, you know. We've got no bike sheds, and there's a few stories about bike sheds which we can't really talk about here. But I think what it is we have to actually, we seem to be breeding a generation of kids who have to be either driven to school or otherwise catch a free bus to school and all these sort of things, you know. So as a result of that, it's a tricky one. Whether or not it's going to reduce the number of vehicles on the road, I don't think so, because the kids will only buy their own car and drive the damn thing to school. So it's a bit of a no-win situation for all of us, I think. So I can support the first bit, but the second bit is a no-go for me.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Yes, I agree with Councillor Tooman about the young people being driven everywhere and anywhere in today's world. And we heard over the last few days why that is, and it's about safety. Parents are just overly worried about their children being, well, it is the helicopter parent. I think we're in that world of helicopter parents just hovering around over their children with whatever they can, which is really sad. But that's not what we're talking about. Look, I totally support the disability fair concession. Absolutely. I mean, like Deputy Mayor said, that we're just 1 second away from being afflicted with a disability. We don't know what happens. So this is a wonderful way to move forward with that. Sitting in on the Access Hamilton, task force, I actually was excited about the idea of free youth concession, but there's a lot more to it, and I think a lot more has to be explored, and in a way, I do agree, though, with Councillor Leary. It is business as usual for the Regional Council. And yes, we sometimes need to have skin in the game, but I think it's too early still to do that. We need to explore this case a lot more. And I will support the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take my right of reply. The disability, Regional Council has picked up the disability concept that came from this council. They might have been talking about it for 6 or 8 years, but they didn't do anything. And this council activated them and pushed them because we were going to be ahead of them by instigating this and bringing this in for Hamilton only, and that pushed them over the, my understanding is that that pushed them over the edge for them to now pick this up for the whole of the Waikato. But this council drove this. You guys have just been to Traffins talking about different types of transports, different concepts, and decongesting our roads. We've got the Minister of Transport who's coming in saying he'll hugely lift the NZTA subsidy on that should we get it through, and this all starts from a report. I've been asked from the Chair of Regional Council to get in and show good faith by putting in a token amount of money to show that we're serious about it, because this is for Hamilton City's benefit only. It may well end up being for the whole of the Waikato like the disability one has, which was driven out of this council. But are you prepared to jeopardise this whole thing by us not putting some skin in the game and showing good faith to put a small amount of money up for a report that we asked for? And the questions that are being asked about you need more information are exactly what this report provides. So come on, guys. What's the point of spending thousands of dollars per head going down to Traffins talking about alternative transport? We're right here today making a decision on where we go with alternative transport to decongest our roads when you guys are backing out. Just have a rethink, guys. This is the decision moment where we could lead this country in looking at another type of transport to educate our children from the age of 5 up to 18 to use public transport so that when they get to 18, they may not go for the car licence. They may just continue because they've been educated to use public transport. And yes, the concept is not just to get to school and back. It is to get to the movies. It is to get to their friends' places. It is full use of public transport for under 18s to decongest our roads, to give our most vulnerable, who are the disabled and our children, and our over 65s already get it through the gold card, public transport instead of relying on the vehicle. So this is a defining moment for this council. So I urge you to support the motion. We'll take the motion in 2 parts after the amendment. Okay? Sorry? No, I said when we come to the motion, we'll take it in 2 parts. The amendment can be taken as one. So we'll go to the board to vote. We're voting on We're voting firstly on the Pascoe-O'Leary amendments.
A, B and C.
The whole thing.
The amendment is lost, 8 against, 4.
So we now go to the motion, but we'll take the motion in two parts. So there'll be receive the report, and then so we need another. We need three.
We'll take A and B together and separate L
Yeah,
and C.
you got it. Okay, so I'll just get Democracy to read what we're voting on, please. And motion 1.
Motion 1 is that the council receives the report and endorses the introduction of a disability fare concession of 100%. And motion 2 is approves funding up to a maximum of 25,000 to support funding the Hamilton City Council local share should the Waikato Regional Council fund the free youth concession fare business case for bus services in Hamilton City, funded from existing 2018-28 10-year plan transport activity budgets.
Okay, so we're voting on motion 1.
The motion is carried, 11 for, 1 against.
We're now voting on motion 2. Okay, cool. Okay, we're re-voting on motion 2. Can we reset again, please? Thank you.
The motion is carried, 8 for, 4 against.
Okay, I'm aware that there is a member of the public here waiting for the next paper. Would you, but I think we need to stop just until 15:15. I apologise for keeping you waiting. So we'll be back at 15:15 to continue with the next paper. Thank you. Probably, we've got a big day to get through, so.
And that's why we're having more